Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. A Night Shift in Radiology by Infinite Style. I worked in the radiology department in a hospital in Cardiff, Wales, UK for about 3 years as an admin and clerical officer before getting a promotion to work in medicine. During those 3 years, I saw a lot of things, ranging from patients dying in the MRI scanners to patients having an X-ray for inserting a meat thermometer into their urethra. Nights always seemed the craziest. One time, a patient came in with armed police after an altercation which involved a knife in the middle of the city center, and it just so happened that the person that he had the altercation with was having an X-ray too. This caused a second alteration right in front of me. Chairs were thrown, a trash bin or two, and then a wheelchair. So I've seen things, some funny, some stressful, some sad, and many bonkers. But this one night, something scary. I would start the night shift around 1900 hours and would work until 08:30 the next morning. This was the standard night shift for the department. We would usually do 3 nights in a row before doing 4 days off, and after the third night, you were ready to sleep for a week. The strange thing was that this was my first night of the 3, so not tired at all. It started off normal, and I arrived at the department, took over from the day staff, and logged into my PC. During that time, we usually would set up our phones or tablets to watch movies or the latest TV series, as there would be a lot of downtime between patients. Like I said, the first few hours were nothing that interesting, just your average run-of-the-mill night in radiology. And then it came to my break. Now, before I tell you more, I should probably explain the layout of this hospital. It's the largest one in Wales, and it's a teaching hospital, and it's pretty old. The best way to get from A to B in this hospital is through what we call the tunnels, or the catacombs. These consist of very dimly lit corridors, old abandoned rooms, tunnels, and other creepy, decrepit areas. The morgue is also found in these corridors, so it's not a nice place to be during the day, let alone the middle of the night. But it is the quickest way to get to places, if you're staff. There's always been rumors and mumblings of strange things happening in these tunnels, and some people say they saw ghosts in old-fashioned porter uniforms taking wheelchairs to pick up patients. Others say they've seen shadows following them from the corner of their eyes. And even one person has claimed they were attacked by a person wearing an old nurse's uniform from the 70s. The place is creepy, even at the best of times. But for me, it never really fazed me. I'd been down there hundreds of times before, and the worst experience up to that point was having a sluice pipe drip human waste on my head. That in itself was a horror show. But tonight would be something different altogether, and maybe not even of this physical world. Like I said before, it was a very quiet night, and I'd been watching the latest series of One Piece because I'm a geek. During my downtime, a radiographer or radiology technician for my American friends out there came to take over and cover me for my break. I decided to go to the 5th floor where the sanctuary, which is a multi-faith chapel, was located. On a night shift, it was one of the most peaceful places in the hospital, but to get there, I had to walk through the tunnels to reach the nearest elevator. I set off on my journey, which would usually take about 15 minutes. I scanned my keycard on the main entrance to the tunnels and then proceeded to walk through. 2 minutes in, I started to feel like someone was walking behind me. It being a busy hospital and basically the tunnels acting like the highway, I didn't think anything of it. And suddenly, I heard panting, like someone was trying to catch their breath after going for an intense run. I turned around to check and saw nothing. A bit strange, but again, I thought it was nothing, maybe just one of the pipes above my head creaking or a generator pumping. So I carried on walking, but I kept feeling like someone or something was watching me and was walking behind me. Out of sheer confusion and fear, I missed my turn towards the elevators and found myself in a large section of the tunnels that I had never been before. It was littered with old stretchers, beds, hospital furniture, and other equipment. Some of this stuff was over 50 years old, maybe even older, just left to decay in a dark, smelly, decrepit, and dusty corridor. This was starting to really creep me out because in all of this confusion, I realized I was lost. It almost felt like I had fallen into the back rooms. Everything looked the same. I could feel a tightening in my chest and could feel the start of a panic attack. I remember clutching my chest and running down a corridor trying to find a signpost or something to tell me where I was. The sense that something was watching me got stronger. And suddenly, I felt something hit my arm in force, almost like someone using a baseball bat. I remember falling to the ground, pulling myself across the floor towards the cold, dusty wall and looking around frantically, trying to find an explanation to what the heck just hit me. Then something caught my eye. It was almost like a black mist with glowing red eyes. It was about 20 meters away from me, just hovering in the middle of the corridor. Was this the thing that had been stalking me the entire time? I got back up and sprinted. I ran down what it felt like 100 different corridors until I finally found a housekeeper. He asked me what was wrong because I looked pale, but I couldn't get any words out. He then grabbed me by the arms with a firm grip and said, "Did you see it too?" That was the last time I ever stepped foot in the tunnels. To this day, I hear rumors of strange things, and I'm not sure what I saw that night. Maybe I was tired, maybe I was stressed, but maybe it was something. Why else would the janitor ask if I had seen it too? What else is down there? I can tell you for sure, I won't be going to find out. Thanks for listening to this. Creepy People Under the Bridge by Zara. First of all, I'm going to start by saying that I'm not a writer and I suck at writing, but I wanted to tell someone my story. It was 2012 and I was dating this guy called Michael. He'd stay weekends at my house, but had to be back in Darlington for his work at stupid o'clock in the morning. So my dad, coming off of his shift, told us that he would drive Michael home, and it was only about an hour. So one morning at 3 a.m., my dad and Michael and I all got in the car. It was all really normal. We got to Darlington, dropped Michael off, and then got back on the road to get back home to South Shields. It was around 4 a.m., and it was pitch black outside. I'm not scared. My dad was 6'5", ex-Army. And don't ask me how this happened, because it should have just been a straight road home. We got lost like it was a horror film. This fog came out of nowhere, and we couldn't see jack shit with our headlights on. My dad came up with the idea of keeping close to the car in front of us, which worked until we lost the car. So there we were at 4:30 a.m., roughly in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. We came across a tunnel as we were trying to find our way home. By this time, I was stressed to fuck, and I begged my dad not to go down this dark tunnel. But my dad, being my dad, drove down it anyway. It was an incredibly short tunnel, but on the other side it opened into like a town of some sort. A really small town. Hand on my heart, all the people came out at the same time from these buildings, and they just stared at us. It was like some Children of the Corn shit, and they just kept staring. My dad backed us out of the tunnel, and it took us another hour to get home, but thankfully the sun was coming up by then. I still, to this day, don't understand what happened to us. Why all those people came out of those buildings and just stared at us so coldly. But that's my story. Guy Really Wanted to Take Me Hunting by Odd Association. I work at a big retail store as a self-checkout host. Most of my days are spent walking laps and listening to customers saying things like, "I don't work here," or "Why aren't you on the register?" I understood their frustrations. Usually there would be 2 or 3 of us at the self-check and maybe 2 manned registers open. We got a new guy, and we'll call him Terry. Terry always wore a mask as if it was 2021 and COVID was still COVIDing. I was training him, telling him to stock candy in bags, and he would ask questions that anyone would ask. If I was in school, if I had a girlfriend. I lived in a small city or a big town that had a good college. Students from all over the country would come and usually wound up in prisons or retail. I usually asked the same questions too. I told him no on both accounts of what he asked me. But then he asked if I ever went hunting. We had a lot of woods and a big forest around the town. So I said, no, I don't like guns. But he said he'd have to take me one day. A few days went by and he was over on my side again. He asked if I had family in town, and if they don't, do they live close by? I lived 3 doors down from my mom. He started talking about hunting again, how he was out with his buddies and started using pack tactics where they would box in the prey and then finish it off. I mean, weird for deer, seeing as they flee at the first sight of a noise. He was off for a few days because new hires have problems getting hours for the first 3 weeks. I talked to one of my coworkers during that time, and they told me that he talked a lot about me. The next time I saw him, his questions were very telling. How tall would you say you are? How much do you weigh? How well do you know the woods past so-and-so street? I'm a big guy at 6 foot 300 pounds, and when he brought up hunting again, a creepy thought would send a chill down my spine. Come on, man. You'd like it. Just some good old boys shooting the shit late at night in the middle of the woods. Then the real fun starts right before dawn. They won't know what hit them. The mask hid most of his face, but I could see it rise when he smiled. I don't know why he thought that would be a great way to convince someone to do something. I mean, other than the feeling like they were about to hunt me, it sounded like I would have been bored as fuck. I must have made a face or something because he turned and walked quickly away. I told a couple of coworkers about the conversation, but that ended up being Terry's last day. I never saw him after that, and I hope that we never meet again. What exactly did I witness that night? By End Groundbreaking. This happened somewhere around 2010, so I would have been around 20 at the time. My parents had recently moved to a woodsy area in Pennsylvania with a lot of mountains and farmers growing their crops and raising their animals. I still lived with my parents at the time as I was trying to save money for my own place. Anyway, one summer night, my mom was driving me somewhere. I can't remember where, but that detail isn't important. We were driving through the winding back roads as we would always have to do to reach the highway. We eventually came to a 4-way intersection that's about a quarter of a mile away from the ramp to get on the highway. And that's when we both noticed the red and blue flashing of a cop car's lights, sitting in front of the house that was at the corner of the intersection. My mom drove slowly around the turn so we could check out what was happening, if anything. There were 2 people standing near the edge of the road, both facing towards the cop car. They were both elderly, and from what I could guess, they were the homeowners, farmer-type people, as their entire yard was nothing but cornfields. As we drove by, my mom pointed out that they were slowly turning around and gave us a very menacing look, which we both thought was strange. That look, paired with the fact that it was dark out and we were kind of in the middle of nowhere, was enough to give anyone chills. Curiosity got the better of us, so my mom turned the truck around midway up the hill so she could get a better look at what was going on. That's when she said something to the effect of, "Look at that cop car. It doesn't look like a normal one." I took another look, and she was right. It looked like a car from the 70s, the kind you would never see on the road today. I should also say that along that side of the road there were two signs, a speed limit sign and the other a sign that indicated the four-way intersection. Both sitting within a ditch at the edge of the road and both being pretty much right in front of the farm couple's house. As we got closer, that's when I happened to see something that to this day still gives me the creeps. I finally noticed the cop, and as I did, I noticed he was pulling something out of the ditch right by one of those signs. A human body. It was a shirtless man, white, brown hair, maybe mid-30s. Thinking back now, what makes this even more strange was there was no ambulance on scene. You would think with a body being involved there would definitely be an ambulance, but there wasn't. It was just the elderly couple and the officer. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't freaking out a little bit. My mom turned the truck around again at the intersection, and we just stared as we drove on by back up the hill. I don't know what made my mom want another look, but she once again turned the truck around about halfway up the hill. It was no more than 10 seconds from her last U-turn, so we didn't get far. And that's when we both freaked out. What we saw at that point was nothing. Just a few seconds ago, the scene was busy as it was the other times we passed by, but now there was just darkness. No cop car, no creepy farm couple, no nobody. Not a trace of anyone ever being there. How did they all just seem to vanish out of nowhere in a matter of less than 10 seconds? After that night, I scoured the local news sites and tried looking on Google to see if there was any mention of the event. I couldn't find anything. But still, to this day, I haven't heard anything about it. It's frustrating when you want answers, especially when someone loses their life. So, what the heck did we witness? Stalked at the Bus Station When I Was 15 by Smooth Marsupial 212. This happened in 1996 in my hometown of about 100,000 people. I was 15 years old, from the suburbs, and went to a high school in the city. English is not my first language, so please bear with me. I finished with class one day, and for some reason I decided to walk to the main bus station instead of just waiting at the nearest stop. I stood at the gate that my bus line number 15 started from. Another bus line, number 17, also started from that same gate. After waiting around 10 minutes, a man asked me if bus number 17 had taken off yet, and I said, "Yeah, sorry, you just missed it." The man, who looked to be around 30 or 40, then introduced himself to me as Mark. He stretched out his hand for me to shake, and I didn't want to be impolite, so I did, and I introduced myself as Maya. My name is not Maya. It was bizarre to me that a grown man was introducing himself to me at a bus station. I mean, I may have been 15, but I knew better. He asked if I had just finished school, and I said yes. And then he asked me what school I go to. I lied. He asked if I was going home, and I said no, even though I was. He asked where I was going, and I said to a friend's house. My bus pulled up, and I got on it. And strangely, this man, Mark, got on as well. I know for a fact he asked me if number 17 had taken off yet. I mean, if he was originally planning on going number 17, there's absolutely no reason that he should get on this bus, number 15. They didn't have a single stop in common. I sat down, and he sat himself right next to me. He asked me what year of high school I was in, and I lied and said I was a junior. I was actually a freshman at the time. He said I looked too young to be a junior, and I say, yeah, I hear that all the time. Then he asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I said no, and he said, you should. I then asked him where he was going, and he said he was going home, and I asked if he wasn't planning on taking number 17. He said no, and told me that he lives at the very end of bus line 15. That was odd. I'd never seen him on this bus before. And then he asked if I was on my way home as well, and I told him again, no, I'm visiting a friend. Looking back, I knew this guy was lying. I was sure he believed me, and I really thought I had the situation under control, and I should have walked up to the bus driver and told him what was going on. But I didn't, because I just wasn't scared enough, and I didn't want to make a scene out of anything. There were plenty of people around, and while this guy was strange, I really thought he was just a harmless, lonely weirdo. We got to my stop, and I purposefully missed it and got off at the next one, thinking I'll fool him and then just walk home a little bit longer. To my surprise, he got off as well, and I asked him where he was going, and he said he wanted to walk me home. Again, I told him that I'm not going home, I'm visiting a friend, and he said that's fine, he'll walk me there. I told him, you really don't need to do that. And then in a stern, irritated tone, he told me to shut up and walk. There was no one on the street. We were the only ones who got off the bus there, and I was alone with this weird man who followed me from the bus station. I couldn't go home because I didn't want him knowing where I lived. I started panicking. I didn't know what to do, so I just froze and stood there, silent. In an instant, he went from weird but chatty and smiling to telling me to shut up, and I went from feeling in control to knowing that I really, really fucked up. He put his hand on my shoulder and told me that he didn't have much time, so we should get going. I wanted to tell him that he clearly does, but I didn't want to anger him, so I just nodded. He told me that if I was good, I wouldn't have to be afraid of him. I lied and said, I'm not afraid. He then asked me if I planned on being good, and I said yes. He forced me to repeat it in a whole sentence. Yes, I will be good. I began walking. I didn't know where I was going, I just walked, and he walked with me, but his hand was still on my shoulder. I'm not religious, but I remember praying that I didn't pass out. My heart was beating so fast and breathing was so difficult. I was sure I was about to collapse and die. Then I spotted an older man tending his garden in front of a house, and that's the last thing I clearly remember. I have a vague memory of running. I was later told that I was screaming for help while running towards the older man while this Mark guy ran off. The older man called the police, and they contacted my parents. The police couldn't do anything but take my statement. And since my parents both worked and couldn't take me to and from school, they bought me a phone the very same day. This was in the 90s when mobile phones were a luxury. I wish the story ended there. After that event, I only ever got on the bus at the stop right in front of my school. A few weeks passed, and I did so like I did any other day. We locked eyes as soon as I stepped on the bus. Mark was on the bus with the biggest grin on his face, like he couldn't have been more excited to see me. I was so creeped out, I immediately got off and ran into the school. I called my mom in tears, and she had me find a teacher to walk me to her car when she came to get me. The school was then notified of the situation. After that, Mark was spotted walking around the school several times, sometimes a few days in a row, but sometimes he wasn't seen for weeks. The police were of no help. They couldn't do anything until he actually hurt me or showed up on school property or at my home. So I spent the rest of the year waiting in the school until late afternoon so my mom could pick me up after work. We always took a very long route home, and I now know she was making sure we weren't getting followed. My parents then had me switch schools. Thankfully, Mark was never spotted in my neighborhood, and I'm very sure he never found out my name or got my address. I only saw him one more time. I was 21, in my hometown on summer break from university. I saw him in a grocery store in a whole different part of town. He didn't recognize me, he didn't even look at me, but I immediately recognized him. Where I live, there is no convicted criminal list like in the US, and such cases are not reported, and I never found out the man's full name. I have no idea who he is or what he has done in the past, and I don't know what he would have done to me. My belief is that he was mentally challenged, saw me, liked me, and followed me. My mother believes that it had been much more complex, like he was planning something and that he knew exactly where we were going. My dad, he still doesn't talk about it. I'm just happy Mark is out of my life. Hey gang, thanks for listening to Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on my channel or podcast, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, share it with a friend, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the stories, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Follow me on social media, and if you'd like to take your support of the channel a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description below, as well as a link to my storefront at tpublic.com. Get yourself some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.